Imagine waking up tomorrow and finding the AI assistant you use every day no longer belongs to the same company you thought because the crown just changed. That's where we're heading with Gemini 3. For the last 2 years, it felt like the AI world has been on rails. OpenAI at front, everyone else chasing. A surprise model here, a multi-model leap there, but nothing that truly broke the storyline we've all been following since late 2022. But every now and then, a moment arises that forces the entire industry to reshuffle the deck. Not a tiny upgrade, not a GPT 4.2, but slightly better. I'm talking about a reset. A moment so big it starts to rewrite who has power, who has distribution, who gets to be the default assistant in your pocket, your desktop, your workflow. And Gemini 3 has the potential to be that moment. This isn't just Google releases a new model, we've seen that before. It's a combination of timing, distribution, and strategic positioning that makes this difference. We are staring at a challenger that could redefine not just the benchmark scores, but the entire landscape of who controls the experience of AI. Think back to 2022, the world didn't change because ChatGPT had the best reasoning, it changed because ChatGPT became the interface everyone used. That interface became the gateway drug to the AI era, not the model itself. Gemini 3 sits at a similar crossroads, except now the stakes are bigger and the players are more prepared. And here's the part most people miss. This shift isn't about one model beating another. It's about 5 axes of power moving at the same time, something we haven't seen before. So before we talk players, before we talk Apple, and before we talk winners, let's break down the board we're all playing on, because once you see these axes clearly, everything else suddenly makes sense. Now let's talk about 5 axes of AI power game and why most people massively underestimate them. To understand why Gemini 3 could trigger a reset, we need to zoom out and look at actual battlefield, not the hype, not the marketing, not the leaderboard screenshot, the 5 axes that actually decide who wins in AI. Most conversation online focus on just one axis, which model is the smartest, but that's like judging the whole chess match by looking at only the queen. Powerful sure, but unless you ignore the rest of the board. So let's break down the 5 axes that really matter. Number 1, frontier capability, raw intelligence. This is the one everyone knows. Reasoning, benchmarks, coding scores, multi-module understanding. OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic has been neck and neck here for a while. Even open source models from China have been creeping closer. But this is only one piece of the puzzle, and honestly, the least misunderstood one. Let's go to number 2, distribution. Who owns the defaults? This is the quiet kingmaker. Google owns Android, Apple owns iOS, Microsoft owns Windows and Office. OpenAI owns basically the App Store presence on Apple. In Anthropic, amazing models, but mostly accessed through apps you choose manually, not defaults. This access determines who gets billions of users without having to fight for them. Now let's go to number 3, capital and compute. Who can burn the most fuel? OpenAI is racing with billions in revenue and billions in burn. Google and Apple, they print money. Anthropic is scaling fast with discipline that impresses enterprise buyers. This axis decides who can afford to stay in a frontier race. Now let's go to number 4, enterprise penetration and trust. Anthropic dominates here. OpenAI forces regulatory spotlight, Google is trusted but slow, Apple has consumer trust but negligible enterprise AI footprints. This axis decides who wins B2B, business to business. And let's go to number 5, control of the UX layers. This one is the throne. Whoever controls the assistants you speak to wins far more than whoever owns the model underneath. Voice is the new home screen. And here's the twist, Gemini 3 threatens to move all 5 axes at once, something we haven't seen since 2022. Now let's put the players on the board, Google, Apple, OpenAI, Anthropic, and see where they stand before the game flips. Before we talk about how Gemini 3 reshapes the board, we need to look at where the major players are standing right now. Because the shift only makes sense when you see how precarious, how uneven, and how strategically vulnerable some of these positions really are. Let's start with Google. For years, Google felt like the sleeping giants in AI. Brilliant researchers, wild breakthroughs, but somehow always half a step late when it comes to turning that genius into a product people actually use. But recently, they've been closing the gap. Gemini 2.5 Pro really sits at the frontier. It's competitive, it's strong on reasoning, and widely capable across big multi-module tasks. And here's where example 1 comes in. Early testers of Gemini 3 are whispering that it's not just an upgrade, it's a breakthrough. Some even call it the most powerful AI model ever made. If that holds true, Google jumps from lagging innovator to frontier leader overnight. Now let's move to Apple. Apple's AI have been, well, let's call it blind. Siri never joined the AI race. Apple intelligence is promising but still maturing. But Apple is playing a different game here. Control the device, control the experience. And if Apple is licensing Gemini 3 to power Siri and future AI across iOS, that's the plot twist nobody saw coming. Because suddenly Apple gets frontier intelligence without spending tens of billions of dollars to train its own models. Then we have OpenAI. They still own the public mindshare. ChatGPT 5 is strong. ChatGPT is mental model for AI globally, but they're burning cash at a historic rate and betting big on hardware, distribution, partnership, everything. They need to win something, and they need to win something big soon. Either the intelligence crown or the distribution crown or both. And finally, Anthropic. Quiet, ruthless, enterprise focused. They're not trying to win the customer world, they're trying to own the budget of the Fortune 500, and it's working. High trust, high alignment, revenue expanding, a disciplined machine. 4 players, 4 very different strategies. But now Gemini 3 threatens to tip the entire board. What happens when the world's biggest smartphone company quietly plugs in the world's strongest AI model? This is where everything tilts, because the Gemini 3 story isn't just about Google making a great model. It's about what happens when the model becomes the brain inside both major mobile ecosystems, Android and iOS. That's a level of distribution power we haven't seen since early iPhone era. And it changed the rules of the game instantly. Think about it. If you pull out your phone and ask a question, set a reminder, summarize a document, or draft a message, whichever assistant handles that moment effectively becomes your getaway to the AI. Not the app you open afterward, not the model you compare on benchmarks. The assistant, that first touch point. Now imagine Apple, a company famous for privacy, polish, and frictionless UX, suddenly powered by Gemini 3 under the hood. Suddenly Siri isn't the punchline anymore, suddenly Apple Intelligence has teeth, suddenly the most widely trusted consumer tech company gets access to the frontier level intelligence without spending tens of billions of dollars to train it. This is where example number 8 becomes relevant. Training frontier models consumes a staggering amount of energy, compute, and water. The cost curves aren't going down, they're going up. So Apple's strategy is brutally efficient. Instead of burning the planet and their bank account, they rent the model and invest their resources into UX partnership. What Google gets in return is even bigger. The role of AI Intel inside. If you open your phone and the default AI experience is powered by Gemini, whether you're on iOS or Android, Google wins the distribution war almost by default. And that's the nightmare scenario for OpenAI, because if they lose the default assistant position, the decades-old truth kicks in. The best model rarely wins, the best distribution almost always does. Now let's explore the future and how the entire market changes depending on which one plays out. We're not heading toward one future, we're balancing between 3, and each one reshapes who wins the entire AI race. Because once you introduce Gemini 3 into both iOS and Android, the game branches not into a million possibilities but into 3 clean, high-stakes scenarios that define who controls the next decades of AI. Let's walk through them. Scenario A. Gemini everywhere. This is the cleanest and the most dramatic one. Gemini 3 releases, it is the clear state of the art, and Apple chips is tightly integrated into iOS. Suddenly, every time someone uses their phone, Google's models is the brain behind the interaction. Now multiply that into billions of devices. In this world, Google becomes the AI Intel inside. Apple leapfrogs OpenAI on consumer experience, Anthropic continues dominating enterprise, and OpenAI keeps the web app crowd but loses the default AI crown. The scenario is the most stable and the most dangerous for OpenAI. Now let's go to scenario B, the device reset. Now imagine OpenAI pulls off the impossible. They ship an AI native device that works, and it's a product so compelling it resets personal computer, voice first, context away, always with you. A device like that could create a new distribution mode, a new subscription engine, a primary assistant ecosystem. It would turn OpenAI from an app into a hardware platform, a move that could bypass both iOS and Android entirely. But this scenario depends on flawless execution, something their current hardware struggles don't guarantee. Now let's go to scenario C, enterprise carve-up, consumer chaos. This is the messy timeline. iOS has multiple assistants, Android has Gemini, users bounce between the apps. No single assistant owns the world. Meanwhile, enterprise buyers consolidate down to Anthropic, OpenAI, and a bit of Google Cloud. In this world, Anthropic becomes the quiet winner, thriving in multi-module environments and capturing enterprise value while everyone else fights for their mindshare. Three futures, all possible, but each one has a different set of winners and losers. Now, what you should actually do depending on your role, whether you're an individual, builder, engineer, or executive. No matter who wins the AI race, here's what you need to do so you don't get left behind. Because here's the truth, you can control which model wins, you can control which assistants become the default on your phone, but you can control how you position yourself, your skills, your workflow, your business in a landscape that's shifting faster than any tech cycle in the last 20 years. Let's break this down role by role. If you're an individual, tools are about to get more opinionated, more integrated, more invisible. Real advantages won't come from memorizing features, it will come from understanding how to think with AI. Treat AI tools like interchangeable contractors. Don't get attached to a model, get attached to the process of breaking down tasks, designing workflows, and using AI as a force multiplier. Your half-life of tool knowledge will shrink, your half-life of judgment will grow. If you're a builder or a founder, you can't bet on one vendor, you can't bet on one model, you can't build a business around being the assistant. Instead, own a specific surface, spreadsheets, emails, terminal, the calendar, build an opinionated workflow on that surface. Use multi-module backends, and yes, financial discipline matters. Exploding usages can't mean exploding token costs. If you're an engineer, your edge is no longer being great at prompting. Your edge is turning unstable models into stable systems. Specialize in orchestration, tools, API, pipelines. Be the person who can balance quality, latency, and cost. Be the person who can tell leadership, we can cut 60% cost with just a 5% quality hit. Security and data boundaries are now part of your job description, whether you like it or not. If you're an executive, you can't pick one winner. You need a portfolio strategy. Ask, where should we lean on the OS assistant? Where should we build our own workflows? Which processes are we replatforming? What metrics will change? Your advantage comes from turning scattered AI experiments into a coherent roadmap, one tied to outcomes, not demos. And please don't burn money training your own models unless you have absurdly specific reason. Now let's bring everything home. We are about to see what happens when the crown of AI finally changes hands and nobody is ready for the fallout. Here's the big picture. Every few years, there's a moment when the ground shifts under the entire tech landscape. In 2007, it was a multi-touch and the iPhone. In 2012, it was deep learning. In 2022, it was ChatGPT. And now we're standing at the edge of the next one. Whether Gemini 3 turns out to be 10% better than today's best models or 20% better almost doesn't matter. The real reset is about positioning, not just performance. It's about Google finally converting raw research power into distribution. It's about Apple suddenly having an actual AI brain. It's about OpenAI fighting to predict the default position they built the entire industry around. It's about Anthropic carving out the most profitable customers while everyone else wrestles over consumers. This reset is happening because the strategic board finally supports it, not because of one model release. Even if Gemini 3 arrives slower than expected, even if Apple rolls out in months instead of weeks, even if benchmarks wobble a bit left or right, The underlying dynamics still point to the same shift, a new alignment of power, a new distribution map, and a new world where the assistant you speak to shapes everything. So what should you take away from all of this? It's simple. Don't anchor your future to a model. Anchor your ability to adapt quickly, to redesign workflows, to understand the surfaces where intent is born, and use AI as a collaborator, not a crutch. The winners of this era won't be people who use flashiest tools. They'll be people who know how to think with those tools. And if the crown really does change hands over to next year, if Gemini 3 becomes the new default intelligence powering billions of devices, then we're going to witness something we haven't seen since dawn of ChatGPT, a shift in who leads, who follows, and who gets left behind. Get ready, because the AI race isn't slowing down. It's about to hit another gear. And this time, the entire industry is on the move. Don't forget to subscribe.